My next guest has made an excellent submission. Radha Stirling is a leading UK-based human rights advocate, crisis manager and policy consultant, focusing on the UAE and the wider Middle East. She's founder and CEO of British-based organisation Detained in Dubai, which, by the way, has helped almost 20,000 victims of injustice over the past 13 plus years. Due Process International and IPEX, Interpol and Extradition Reform. Radha also hosts the Gulf Injustice podcast as well. That's the Gulf, Gulf, Injustice podcast. She joins us live in Australia at the moment. Radha Stirling, welcome to TNT.
Oh, thank you so much. Good to talk to you about these very pressing issues.
And usually when you do appear on TNT, and I've heard you on other programs, you're usually in London. Where are you today and why?
I am. I'm in Cairns at the moment, and lucky for me because I will be going to that Tucker Carlson Freedom Conference in June. But I've just been visiting family, really, and continuing with my work here.
So you're here for a lengthy period because he's not here, I think, until June the 21st. His first show is on, or first conference. That'll be interesting for a lot of people, not usually connected or able to hear him speak.
I think it will be fantastic, actually, because even if people don't like what he says, even if people criticize him for interviewing Putin, for example, we need to have these conversations. We need to have these debates. And he does bring that to the table.
Yeah,
I think it's the perfect time for him to come, especially with all of this talk about e-safety and censorship.
Yeah, very much so. All right. Are you shocked from your vantage point in the UK to see Australia having to push through such far-reaching censorship powers? The Australian government wants to censor the entire global internet, not just in its own backyard.
I mean, that doesn't even make legal sense. They know they can't do it. There's no way that we'd let Saudi do the same thing, for example. They'd be censoring all of the Khashoggi posts that we made at the time. So, I mean, it's just not even legally possible. It's not viable. The only thing they could do is censor Australians, and that means shutting down businesses or using their influence to, okay, X, if you want to have the Australian clientele, which is obviously going to make you so much money a year, you're going to have to do all of this. And through that sort of lobbying influence, they could end up changing certain online platforms. But I mean, as you said, this public consultation, I went through it. It was very long and very complicated, and I can't imagine too many people going to the lengths that it takes to respond to that in any detail. What I found most concerning in there is that there was a question about whether the e-safety commissioner should be able to essentially demand information from online services and platforms. And that was just snuck in there in the fine print. If anything, you would kind of read it the opposite, that they were trying to increase transparency of their little body. But no, they were trying to increase transparency from third-party companies who they essentially want to demand hand over private information about individuals in the same way that the Pfizer warrant works in America. But at least there you get a warrant. With this new power that they're talking about in this consultation, she could literally demand that a third-party company provide information about specific individuals without requesting a warrant, without law enforcement. And if that company doesn't comply, they could be penalized to the tune of, what was it, 700,000? That will no doubt increase over time with these expansive powers. And I think everyone has a duty to really fight back against this expansionism. We do not need it. It's not for you. And it's only going to get worse if we don't hit it in the head now. And I thank Elon Musk for actually taking on this body. And I really wish him all the best through the courts. And I hope that we can support him in that endeavor.
Same here. And you always should worry when governments start to change the timeline of their policy or their reviews. And that's what's happened because the Albanese government has brought forward this statutory review of the Online Safety Act 2021 12 months earlier than required. Why the rush?
That is very interesting, to rush it through like they have every other seemingly safety-oriented bill. They've rushed through Parliament, they've rushed it through without debate. The national ID cards, digital ID, all of that's been going through without consultation. If anything, we need more democracy, and more democracy requires more time to consider the issues, to have those public debates. and then have the public vote on these individual requests. Because I think the climate at the moment is that most Australians do not want the e-safety commissioner to be able to censor whatever the hell they like. And I think most people overall support Elon Musk's endeavors in that respect. People want to have access to the internet. They want to be able to make decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
They don't need a nanny state.
Correct. We're adults, although I get the feeling that the e-safety commissioner likes to treat us like kiddies. So wouldn't we be more sensible trying to encourage even our e-safety commissioner to talk to the big tech giants about the age in which individuals can start getting associated and having an account in social media? Wouldn't that be a better, decent and achievable campaign and a fairer campaign to protect children, if that's what you're about, as opposed to start pretending you can censor the internet?
I think appealing to those companies for their willingness to perhaps comply with requests like that, if there was enough public support, you would probably find that they would.
Yeah.
However, there's also the pushback side of things, which is that parents have responsibility for their children and decision making. And if the parent wants a child to be on X or be on Facebook, that should be their decision, not necessarily the majority of e-safety Karens, essentially.
Yeah, it's like crossing the road, you know. Parents are in charge of their kids when it comes to crossing the road. Why do you leave it to government to start telling the road that the cars have to stop for the children? In your submission for the review of the Online Safety Act 2021, you address numerous questions which government put forward in the issues paper. What do you think, though, when it's all boiled down? What are the two most important issues, do you think?
I think the two most important issues about this, I mean, obviously, we can't have content. We cannot have a body telling us what disinformation is. I mean, you look at the disinformation and where it came from over the past 5 years, most of it came from our own government.
Correct.
Do we trust them to decide what is disinformation?
Or maybe the government could be, or maybe the government could be under the umbrella to be scrutinised. That'd be good.
I just don't think there's ever going to be enough oversight. There's ever going to, we see it in the US. There's bodies with oversight over other bodies, and it doesn't actually help, because at the end of the day, we've got all of those bodies. We can see that in the UK, we can see that in America, and still the disinformation from the government comes, still the censorship of dissenting voices on, for example, COVID issues. So we see time and time again that the government will try to control us as much as possible, and that means cancelling voices that aren't serving the government, and that's not about the people.
Yeah. How could the government better protect those who have experienced or encountered online harms, do you think?
I mean, that's always a difficult one. I think that we see that in the United Kingdom, where there is significant harassment. And I mean, obviously, the internet is one of those areas where people can make a whole website or a whole blog or a troll account against you and do incredible damage. But we do already have pre-existing laws for that. We do have anti-harassment laws. We have, this behavior is already criminalized. So I don't really think that supervision of the internet is the solution to that. I think enforcing already the criminal law that we have in place would go a long way to preventing that in the future.
And this whole business about giving punishment powers to the e-safety commissioner, that must concern you. Penalties and the ability to have a higher power. You mentioned it briefly there at the start of our interview, but seriously, this is an unelected position.
It's an unelected body. We have no say whatsoever. They've expanded her powers already significantly, and they say that, and they're proud of it, actually. And they're trying to expand it even more to the point where she essentially acts as an agent for, let's face it, the CIA and our intelligence services who want particular outcomes from the public, and they will censor and deprive us of access to information, access to services that don't conform with what that government wants at the time, or those intelligence agencies. Furthermore, she was offered a position by the CIA, and I think that alone should concern us. Yeah. This is essentially intelligence services planting an all-powerful, all dominating individual who's completely unelected, who we don't even get a say on what they, I mean, okay, we make these submissions. Will they be taken into account? I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to absolute domination unless we really, really fight back.
Yeah,
But
we've got
very,
it.
very concerning, absolutely.
So how are we comparing at the moment? Although I must admit, with what's happened in the past 4 weeks, trying to get that video of the bishop being stabbed banned both in Australia and around the world. I guess I know the answer to the question, but I'll ask it anyway. How does Australia compare with other countries regarding internet censorship?
You know, it's become a big issue, and the push is really coming from the United States, and it came, you know, really around sort of 2016, 2018 with Trump coming into the presidency. They didn't want it, and they wanted to be able to have the power to issue their own disinformation and cancel truthful information, to even lock up people with dissenting voices. And I think this is not just Australia, but Australia is often used as a testing ground for authoritarian and undesirable practices coming from the United States overall and that culture. So unfortunately, we are the testing ground as far as we are testing just how far we can go. Yes, the UK has some online safety, but it's bare minimum. And the US obviously has freedom of speech enshrined into the Constitution. We don't have that. But we do have, you know, enough that we could actually fight this through the courts to establish a precedent that would preserve our rights in that respect.
Yeah. Another completely different topic, but it's the same kind of control issues involved. And I guess you've arrived in this country and thought to yourself, well, hang on a minute, I've just seen what the lead item is in one of the papers. Macquarie Bank has just announced it will no longer accept cash and checks from customers as it moves to a completely digital transaction model. Despite all the warnings over the past 3 years, we seem in Australia to be getting closer to this idea of having a central bank digital currency, that it is all controlled electronically by our banks, and that, we're at the behest of big banks, powerful, influential big banks, and we don't have our cash in our hands.
That's absolutely right. I mean, Macquarie Bank, boycott them. 100% people should boycott any bank that won't allow us to use cash, because we need to slow down the digitalization of currency. And we only need to look to Canada to see what they did to people's bank accounts who were protesting against the lockdowns. They froze their bank account, froze access to them. People couldn't eat, they couldn't run their businesses, they couldn't pay their bills. And even, you know, one of the other issues is if America doesn't like something that you've done, or another country doesn't like something that you've done, even if you're not an American citizen, they can actually call for these bank accounts to be frozen as well. You always need to have access to your cash.
Must.
You must. I just think it's going to be misused. I think if the Australian government had a completely cashless society, that anyone violating lockdown rules or not vaccinated or not wearing a mask, you know, as a great example, I think that they would have been penalised, possibly even cut off from their own money.
Yeah, very, very true. We had an example of the New South Wales Revenue Agency being hit by the Ombudsman and criticised because they decided to just extract funds from someone's bank account. As a matter of fact, 1 million particular customers, they call them customers, debtors, just take your money because you owed the government money. And this is just because you've set up a direct debit. If that kind of thing can happen in 2024, imagine what will happen. And you've described it so well. Don't think that any of this is, down the track or a conspiracy or possibly out of reach. They will try anything. And this is part of the process of getting access to what you have.
The world is moving at a faster pace than it ever has with all AI technology developments.
Yeah.
And just everything is fast paced now with the internet and the new age. And I just think we're at serious risk that this is going to happen, not this year perhaps, but it could be next year or the year after. We saw it in Canada. And I think increasingly it's going to be more like the social point system that we see in China that we criticize them for. If you don't have a woke point of view, or you offended someone, perhaps they're just going to take the money straight from your account. You're fined, you're frozen, you're ousted from society. It's an extreme risk, and people need to fight back, and they can do that absolutely with their vote at the next election. Do not vote for anyone who has supported censorship, digital ID, cashless society. Look at who they are. Do not vote for them. They do not deserve to be in there. This is such a big issue. It will permeate through all other issues. So it's not even worth looking at those. Let's look at this as the only and primary voting point.
Yeah, Australians are known to be apathetic. This is at a time in our history when we cannot afford to be apathetic. Radha Stirling, thank you so much for your time today. Enjoy your trip.
Thank you. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Radha Stirling, leading UK-based human rights advocate, crisis manager and policy consultant. And good to have her on the program. You've probably heard her before, but there are so many things that change in the area of censorship at the moment that it's always good to try and get the latest and see what she has to say about what's occurring. We've got to stop being apathetic and sitting around thinking, oh, it'll be right. It won't be right. This is all pushed as a global system that we've got to conform to, whether it's central bank digital currencies or whether it's e-safety commissioners to police the internet, all of that sort of stuff, straight out of 1984, and we've got to stand up against it. I intend to do so right here. Coming up on the program, the latest episode of Please Explain. Thanks to Pauline. We'll be back after this on TNT.